Hey, this is Dennis, and welcome to another episode of the Grounded Reason podcast, where Joel and I usually discuss things like cord cutting and, internet tech issues. Today, a little bit of a different tact, because last week was net neutrality day, where the internet... actually, we're recording on net neutrality day, but by the time you hear this...
hopefully this will be able to be uploaded. Because everything's dragging to a grinding halt.
Yeah, but see, something happened on Net Neutrality Day, which kind of really gave me pause. See, some companies that you wouldn't expect to be supportive of net neutrality came out supporting net neutrality.
Yeah.
But they kind of did it for ulterior devious motives. And we'll kind of get into all of that later. But it made me think about how... we're almost living in an era of post-truth where, like, the truth really doesn't even matter anymore. It's kind of just...
Which is a sad...
It is. It's terrible. But it's kind of how, if you just... we're almost in, like, where propaganda is more important than actual facts.
Yeah, and I don't want to toe our little party line here. Right, but the podcast's name is Grounded Reason.
Right.
And reason is based on fact, right?
Right.
You need fact to reach reasonable conclusion.
And I mean, it does tie in a bit, because today I'm going to go into how the internet can be used to kind of suss out what's real and what isn't.
Yeah.
But first, before we get into all of that, because we're going to probably take a little bit of a, I'm going to take a little bit of a long path today. Let's
do it.
But let's start with net neutrality day and what that was.
Yeah.
On Wednesday the 12th, a ton of big tech companies like Amazon, Netflix, Twitter, groundedreason.com,
big companies
all came together and decided to have a day of action.
Yep.
So where, like, if you went on my site, if you went to groundedreason.com, you would get a pop-up, which I never use. I never ever you've never no one has ever gone on my site and gotten any type of pop-up ad. Not even like the subscribe for the newsletter is off to the side or it's at the bottom. It's never like, you go to a lot of sites, it kind of just you're almost playing whack-a-mole, like trying to actually
it inserts itself into the center, and
right.
You have to find that.
But I actually did that for this. It was it would only happen once, like once if you were coming from the same computer. If you hopped on there, it would come up and it would basically explain what net neutrality was, and you could fill out a form and file a comment with the FCC through that form. And a lot of companies did that. Reddit actually had like a really, as soon as you went to Reddit, it basically typed out, like a very slow, like it would type out like somebody was actually like slowly typing it, explaining, what net neutrality is and what's at stake. And you would watch, you could watch it. And it is basically to show people, hey, if Ajit Pai has his way and repeals the net neutrality rules that were put in place back in 2015, ISPs can pretty much do whatever they want when it comes to blocking and throttling and, giving preferential treatment to which content
they deem fit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, to like that was kind of the action on what happened on Wednesday. And I mean, just to like, I mentioned a few companies that did it. Actually, Tim Berners-Lee, who, if you don't know, is kind of the founder of the web. Like, he kind of put together at CERN, kind of put together like the document share known as HTML.
He was the program manager that ran everything at the time.
Right. So he actually put a video together explaining how important net neutrality is and how, how we can't lose it and how we shouldn't lose it. But Facebook had they had a note of support. Google had a blog post, which was actually kind of disappointing. I was expecting them to at least take their Google Doodle and kind of like do something with it, but they didn't. The big ones that actually, the ACLU, of course, had like a pop-up ad. Reddit, I already mentioned. Amazon, while on their homepage, they had it on the corner. It was there like an ad almost. So a little more effort there than Google. Twitter had a policy blog post, but then like they actually had a net neutrality hashtag and they were pushing net neutrality tweets and stuff like that. So
don't forget the mayor letter I was telling you about.
Oh yeah, that's right. Go ahead.
So there was a letter that was written up by 50 of the largest cities in the United States, with leaders from all of these cities signing it, and 45 of the mayors of those cities all signed this letter, basically advocating for net neutrality to be maintained, and it was sent to Ajit Pai at the FCC.
Yeah. And my favorite of the day, well, I didn't mention, to give them their props, because Netflix kind of held out on this for a while. Yeah. And, to give them their props, they actually had like a banner like at the top the whole time about like net neutrality and what it means and how to support it. So, kudos to them. But my favorite of the day was Pornhub.
Yeah, Pornhub. Like, seriously? I thought that, no, I didn't actually see the message. I didn't go to Pornhub.
When I saw it on Verge. I did not go to Pornhub to see it, unfortunately.
All right.
I use other sites. But
I'm not saying I'm above it. I just didn't go today, right? That's all.
I'm just kidding, Pornhub. But they had one that just said, it was like a banner there that's like, slow porn sucks. And
yeah, no shit. Like, if there was a way to target the IP addresses of the Senate and just slow down their porn, that would be the way to really handle it.
But to get to like the really unnerving part of it is just and to the part that is really kind of cynical and kind of bullshit, frankly. AT&T joined the net neutrality protest, basically saying that it supports net neutrality but doesn't like the rule, the Title II rule.
Right.
Okay. Comcast kind of did like the same thing. They said they support the efforts of the Internet Day of Action, but don't think that the FCC Title II rule applies. Now, okay, this is similar to like what Verizon did back a few months back when they made that video. They said they were for net neutrality, but against Title II. And it's utter bullshit.
Well, it's typical stuff, right? Like, so this is the old line that monopolists have where they go, hey, we agree that everyone should play by the rules. We just think these are the wrong rules. Trust us. We have your best interest at heart.
The funny part about the Verizon thing, and this is really where it's kind of like you can tell that it's utter bullshit, because the FCC actually put net neutrality rules in place back in 2010 without declaring Title II. So we're talking about the way they want it, where their information services not being regulated as common carrier like a utility, not being regulated like utility.
Right.
And they in 2010, the FCC said, fine, we'll make these rules that are called the Open Internet Rules. And there was basically no blocking, no throttling, same rules we have now.
Right.
But Verizon sued them.
Yeah.
And Verizon won because
they needed Title II to
enforce. And the court, the court said that. The DC Circuit Court ruled in the Verizon versus the FCC in 2014, because it goes through the courts for a while, that net neutrality isn't enforceable by the FCC on non-Title II entities. However, the FCC has the power to classify them as a Title II entity.
Yeah.
Is essentially what they said. So the court is like, look,
you can do it, just not this way.
Yeah, and if you really want all the ins and outs of this, I'll put a link in the show notes on like the history of net neutrality in the U.S. and why it's been kind of like a back and forth game. And we've covered this on a few podcasts in the past. But what they're doing is kind of saying that they support the outcome, but don't support any rules to enforce them.
It's insane.
It's like a congressman saying they want society to be less violent, but they think that rules against murder and assault are kind of an infringement on one's liberty, so we shouldn't have those.
It's like, say, hypothetically, the Republican House putting forward a healthcare bill that strips away
I'll get to
protections
that.
And
because that's actually a part of
funding.
That's part of this.
But exempts them from it.
Right. Yeah, that's my favorite. Yeah. But that's what it is. It's like they don't. It's like they're giving you the nicety of it. like, oh, yes, that's a great idea. Let's not really make any rules that'll make it enforceable. And the court has said to the FCC that they really, because the FCC has done this every possible way they can. They've used every rule, every, tool in their toolbox to put net neutrality in place without going the Title II route. And none of them have held, because the court's basically saying, no, they need to be a Title II entity if you want to do this.
It broke down for two reasons, right? Like, that's the second reason. The first reason is that all of the ISPs sued.
Oh, well, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
they could have just left it as is.
That's
and not
my point.
Them.
Again, it's just totally disingenuous, right? Like,
right.
If the rules weren't a big deal and they just don't like the Title II designation for some odd reason.
That's how we had it for half a decade.
Yeah, then, hey, just don't sue.
Right.
Right?
Let it go. Like, all right, we'll just accept the rules and then you won't have Title II and fine.
Right.
But that wasn't good enough. So that's where we are. And what I'm wondering if what they're doing is taking a cue, and you mentioned this with healthcare.
Yeah.
Are they taking a cue from like what's happening now in Washington because it's an out lie is kind of really what the ISPs are doing. It's like utter, like it's gaslighting. I know that's a term that's been overused.
No, it
lately.
is. Gaslighting, just for anyone who doesn't know offhand, is basically where you let's say Dennis and I were talking about like doing something for the podcast, and I said, "Hey, Dennis, do you mind uploading the podcast tonight?" And he said, "Sure, whatever." And when he went to upload it, I had already done it, and I said, "What are you talking about? I never said that."
Right? Yeah.
Like,
it's like a
making
flat
the
out
other person
denial.
feel like they are crazy
Right.
for what was said just a moment ago. And that's what it is. It's a flat out denial that negates what was said in the previous breath.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like a total twist of like reality and logic is kind of what they're saying. And we see this happen a lot in government these days, it seems.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of it has to do with like media and their feel to have to give equal time or to entertain almost any point.
Yeah. I mean, here, I'll use one that shouldn't be too inflammatory to start, right? Like the people, like there are people in this day and age that for some reason, Shaquille O'Neal, I'll use him as an example, believes the world is flat.
Yep. Okay. Yes.
Right. And
there's a whole. I mean, if you don't know,
I believe it's Shaquille who said. I believe he's one of the gentlemen.
Well, he's one of the big. He's one of the big names.
But there's other people.
Well, if you go on YouTube and you might think you might think I'm joking out there if you haven't seen this yet.
This is the thing.
But if you type like flat Earth,
there are people that believe this.
There's like a whole conspiracy. Like there's videos of people trying to logically explain like that the Earth is really flat and we've all been fooled, like we've all been duped.
And that all those ships that go off in the ocean have really been falling off the edge of the world into a dragon's mouth.
Right? I don't know. I don't know if they go that far.
I'm just saying.
But no, they actually try to come up with like logical reasons the Earth is really flat and we've all been duped by science.
So
scientists.
My point of
it's like a big conspiracy.
Yeah, of course it is. So my point as an example is that's insane.
Yes.
Right? That's utterly insane.
Yes.
And has been disproved for hundreds of years.
Well, just the amount of like cooperation between various industries, like to keep that ruse going. Like when I get on a plane.
I can't. I won't. And you're almost doing it, man. I won't even entertain it. It is total insanity. Like anyone who says that, I immediately discount any other thought they have. Right? They are a lunatic.
Yeah, it's just insane.
So it's a crazy person's thought, right? And the press will especially like cable news, but they will put a person who is a flat Earth conspiracy theorist with a actual scientist,
right?
And they will force this poor scientist to have to argue this buffoon,
right? Which is like, it's okay. So you have a person there who's like, likely a PhD,
right,
and has to debate some like insane person. And insane might be, that if you're,
I'm totally.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to slight the insane.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. I think this is actually, that's absolutely a good point. Like, because there are plenty of insane people that know the Earth is round, right? Like,
exactly.
And so they go, hey, I may be crazy,
but I know the Earth is round.
I know the Earth is round.
Right.
These people are just dumb.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So yes, duly noted. So that's the example. I think you're totally right. I mean, like this kind of, you have to give the ridiculous opinion equal time is a big problem, right?
Yeah, and what I think you can do here is, and a lot of this is, if you hear something on TV, cable news, or even if you read, this is what I do these days. Even if I read something, like, because while you get good investigative reporting is actually happening now, which I felt for a while before, the past year, it's kind of lax. It seemed.
Yeah, but it was there.
It was there, but it was like you really...
It was under the surface.
Yeah. And now it seems like there's a lot of like good investigative reporting going on. But even then, I still like the sources are linked usually in the article, and I like to go to the horse's mouth and try to suss it out myself.
Well, the other thing that I think you do, so this is the thing that I tell people when I'm doing research of whatever type, is that there are organizations that so let's just start first with media organizations.
Mm-hmm.
There are organizations that ascribe to a certain level of journalistic rigor. And then there's everyone else.
Yep.
Right? That things need to be multi-sourced and run through. And they make mistakes, right? Like they make mistakes and, they try and retract them and whatever, but they're multi-sourced. They do their best to, suss out the actual, truth of what's going on in the day-to-day world.
Right.
Then you've got like your papers, right? Like where I should be able to see an actual source. I should be able to go to the source material because it is cited and go and read. Like if you're citing a statistic, I should be able to go to, I'll pick on the Bureau of Labor and Statistics site and see the same data.
Yes.
And that's, I think I said this on one of the podcasts. That's one of my biggest problems with the way Chairman Pai has been doing this whole thing, is he's been making these assertions about how this net neutrality stunts innovation and so on. He's never once cited a source. He's never once put any data out there.
Well, I mean, he did put one out there, but it was really one. It was one report that really didn't. It was very dubious and has already been picked apart.
Yeah, wasn't that the industry paper that we reviewed on the podcast?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one thing I'll do when I see, like, because there's so many think tanks out there that are really just, they're guns for hire when it comes
industry
to
shills.
Yeah, they're intellectual guns for hire is really what they are. And you put enough money in their lap and they'll write you a paper that
they crap out of paper
that just basically says what you want to say. I mean, and that's kind of happening right now with, like you were saying, with Title II. I mean, all the ideas that are coming out of the Chairman Pai and Trump's transition staff with the FCC, they're all coming out of the American Economic Institute, AEI. Really, it's all it is. All those ideas are being laundered through.
I've watched you argue with those guys on Twitter.
Yeah. I mean,
about that.
That's really what it is. They're laundering this, telecom supported idea through the FCC. It's basically a big regulatory capture. Is really what it is.
There's an off-air copy out there
allegedly
of me making a rant about a puppet, and it's not good. But so we edited that out. But the point being is that the industry is just being parroted, or I'll say it this way: Ajit Pai and all of his staff are just parroting what the industry is saying.
Yeah, that's really what's happening.
Period,
here.
point blank.
Yeah, because it's the same. You can go look at the tweets on what Ajit Pai has said in the past, and then go look at the tweets from what like the NCTA and all the other various.
And I tried to give
ISP
them a
groups,
shake,
and they're not. I mean, they're it's the same thing. And okay, here's another thing I'll do. I like to subscribe to like an email list from something like FreedomWorks, which was like the Koch brothers, lobby arm, essentially.
You are a glutton for punishment.
Well, what I do, the reason why I do it is because I want to see what they say. I want to see like what talking points are coming out about certain issues and this and that.
Yeah.
Because then I'm cued in, and if I hear someone on the news like use one of those talking points, I'm like, aha, like I know exactly where they're getting this from, and then I know that it's not true reporting at that point. It's just somebody parroting. Someone's pet cause.
Let me play,
and I do the same thing, and I do the same thing on the other end of the spectrum too.
But let me play like slight devil's advocate, right? Just in this sense that if someone were, let's say, parroting back the industry, but they cited their source, they said, "Hey, I read this study over at such and such industry group, and I heard this, and this sounds reasonable to me." That's not so bad, but that's not what's done by Congress or the FCC and so on. They pass it off as their thought. They put the stamp of government legitimacy on it.
Yes,
and that's wrong.
But that's the funny part is that's how business is done these days.
I know.
They pay these companies to come in and write these papers to basically confirm what they already want.
Yeah.
What I also suggest doing is checking funding sources if you really want to find out, like,
totally agree,
where the truth lies. Like, if somebody throws some kind of like intellectual, claptrap in your lap about something, go see where it's funded, see who's funded those studies, see who funded, and then you'll kind of get an idea. Like if if the Koch brothers are funding a climate change document, more than likely it's going to say that there is no man-made global warming.
Yeah.
And that's because the Koch brothers funded
the Koch brothers are holding the checkbook going, who do I make this out to? And that's a strong incentive for these groups. They're not doing rigorous science.
No.
They're just saying things.
Okay. So I want to remind people that what we're doing here is going over how you can use the internet to kind of really find where the truth lies.
Yeah.
Like in an issue. Because obviously AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon don't support net neutrality.
Right.
They say they do, but they don't support any real mechanism of making it happen. But if you're if you don't listen to this podcast and you're not, or you just don't even, if you're just not up on the issues at all of net neutrality, you might hear what it is, but you've never actually looked it up or wondered anything about it. And you hear that all these companies are saying that ISPs are bad because they don't support net neutrality. And then you have AT&T and Comcast and Verizon saying they do.
Right.
You're probably confused.
At a minimum, you're confused, right? And then you hear...
And that's what they want.
Oh, exactly. And then you hear from, the government institution like the FCC, who's the authority on the topic, hey, here's this statement that was crafted by, such and such association. But they don't tell you that it came from that association.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's no wonder people get mixed up on stuff. But I will say the net neutrality is one of the few issues in this world today that Americans almost unanimously agree on.
Yes, and I think that's...
Despite all the confusion and misinformation.
But that's why they're using the tactic.
Well, of
because
course.
They're trying to draw a line, because they know, okay, they're sitting in their room and they're saying net neutrality is very, like, everyone's behind it.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is say we're behind it too,
right.
But then try to draw this distinction about Title II.
Right.
And common carrier.
Right.
And
it's just bullshit.
It's total bullshit. And what I said is, like, they're getting this, because they're seeing this work in politics, because it does work in politics. And a good example of how this is kind of working in politics is the Republican. You mentioned this earlier. The Republican health care bill.
Repeal and go fuck yourself.
Right. Essentially, yeah. To borrow from
I'm
Pod
sorry.
Save America.
Pod Save America. I'm citing my source.
We're friends of the pod.
Yes. Friend of the pod.
But what they're basically saying is, okay, the Senate bill and the CBO. Let's set something straight here, because to Paul Ryan's credit, Paul Ryan came out this week and actually said the CBO is like a legitimate.
Oh yeah,
like it's a legitimate thing. It's you have to trust them.
They're totally legit.
Well, yeah, they're a bunch. Well, they're a bunch of like nerds.
They're economists.
Crunch numbers all day, and they know this stuff inside out.
So before I had to quick aside, back in the day when I was coming out of college, and I was like, young buck, just studied economics, really enjoying it. And I was thinking about going to get my doctorate in it, which never happened. CBO was one of the places that I was going to try and apply into, but I had to pay rent. So I took the first job I could get. And here we lie. Yeah, I worked in IT.
And not only that, but what a lot of people don't know is the CBO is part of the legislative.
Yes, they are.
Branch.
They report directly to Congress.
Yeah, they're not appointed. The head of the CBO isn't appointed by the president.
No,
it's appointed by the Senate pro temp, and I think it's either the speaker or the majority leader. It's one of the two.
I think it's the speaker.
But the last CBO head was appointed in 2015 when Republicans had both houses, and the current head of the Health and Human Services, Tom Price, who is a Trump appointee, actually appointed the current head of the
former
CBO.
congressman, head of the HHS now, was the one who appointed.
Because I've seen some tweets from the president that kind of
cast aspersions on the
CBO, and I'm just like, well, wait a minute, you appointed your guy appointed the head of the CBO. It's an organization that honestly is beyond reproach. Now, that's not to say that they're perfect.
Yeah, they certainly make mistakes.
Yeah, but it's not like they are the referee.
Yeah,
you're essentially yelling at the referee for losing the game.
And so let's go with that analogy for a second. I'll switch up a tiny bit. I'm going to use umpire, right?
All right.
Because I think this works better for me, at least to say it.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
You have to, in baseball, for the game to work, assume that the umpire is calling balls and strikes even.
Yes.
Right? If you don't assume that, the whole game breaks down.
Right.
Right.
And that's their job.
Yeah, their job is just to call the balls and strikes.
And that's what the CBO's job is.
Yeah, and they make mistakes calling balls and strikes.
Of course they do.
But they make those mistakes relatively even.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And that's all it is. Right? Like, so when someone looks at like the CBO's work and they go, oh, well, the projections for when the Affordable Care Act were rolled out, they got such and such statistic wrong, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Well, it's not an enviable task to try and figure out how to do an economic forecast for a shift of 1/8 of our or 1/6 of our economy.
And to be fair, like, it's going off the assumption of things are going to happen as they're laid out. And as you know, there were parts of the ACA were overruled by the courts. Yep. Not every state took the Medicaid expansion, blah, blah, blah.
All sorts of things.
All sorts of things happened to stop, to kind of change the formula. So, the prediction's only going to be as good as the plan.
But not even to make excuses for them.
Right.
The overall point is an organization like the CBO is the gold standard for nonpartisan assessment of like economic policy.
Right. And that's kind of why the reason why I'm going to go into that is because I'm going to use the CBO data here.
Yeah.
And because with the healthcare bill, and this really got me, because this is like blind. I don't mind spin in politics. Spin is expected. Yeah. Out and out lying is beyond the pale.
Yeah.
Now, and here's an example of this, because the CBO reported that basically the Senate bill is cutting $772 billion out of Medicaid. And like Senator Pat Toomey had the gall to basically say no one is going to lose coverage under Medicaid. No one on Medicaid is going to lose coverage from this bill. And Kellyanne Conway actually said pretty much the same thing.
Right. Which is an out-and-out lie.
Yeah, because 15 million people are going to be losing coverage from this.
Alone.
Right. And that's not just typical spin.
Yeah.
That is saying the exact opposite of what's going to happen.
Yeah. In like...
Because they think that no one... Because, again...
If you create enough confusion...
Yes.
People don't have enough time in their day because they're busy to do the research to clarify the issue.
Yeah.
That's the cynical thing, the cynical theory they function on.
But,
and I think the FCC is doing the same sort of thing.
But, let's rewind the clock back to like 1990.
Sure.
If we're luckily, like, while politicians were kind of dishonest, they've always been dishonest.
Yeah.
I don't think it was as bad as it is right now.
No.
And thank goodness, because we didn't have the internet to actually go and like look things up.
Yeah, it was much more difficult.
Yeah, I would say it was impossible for the average citizen.
Yeah.
To do what we can do. Right now, I can just fire open a laptop. I can go to the CBO website and I can look at it right there.
That's kind of primitive that you're using a laptop. You could just use your
I could have just used my phone. I don't like the small type.
Yeah,
it's just like getting old, I guess. Actually, what's really funny, and I just want to this is a bit of an aside here, because the beauty of the CBO numbers is they actually cut another $424 billion out of the exchanges. Yeah. Now, the exchanges are private. That's not Medicaid. That's private insurance. And that'll result in 7 million people losing healthcare coverage for total. That's where the 22 number comes from, because they say basically the bill's going to cut like 22 million people off healthcare. All right, so
two-thirds of it, just to be clear, is from the Medicaid cut.
Right.
The other third comes from the cut to the market.
Now I'm like, okay, so wait a minute. There's like a math formula here.
Yeah.
I can say, $772 billion over 10 years will fund 15 million people on Medicaid.
More or less.
Yeah, I'm sure,
Yeah,
that's a little back, you're like
back of the napkin.
Yeah, but it's a legitimate thing to say. That much investment, tax dollar investment, will fund 15 million people over 10 years.
About right.
That's what the CBO is saying.
Yep.
On the other hand, $424 billion will fund 7 million in the private industry exchanges.
Yeah.
So when you do the math, that means per person, Medicaid, it takes $51,467 to insure them for 10 years.
Yep. I know where you're going.
On the private exchanges, healthcare, private companies, it costs $60,571 per person.
It's like 84 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, it costs...
if you were to go with Medicaid versus the exchange.
Right. It costs the taxpayer 18% more to insure someone on the private sector than it does on Medicaid.
Yep.
And that's like in light of the fact that Medicaid has generally less healthy people on the rolls than the private sector will. I mean, and that's just really because Medicaid tends to have a lot of people on disability, a lot of, people of lower income who, they're not going to be able to eat.
Yeah, it's meant to be for people, generally speaking, that are, disabled in some manner or
poverty.
Yeah, they're relatively poor.
Right. Okay, so you're getting better. You're getting a better price on insurance when the risk pool is bad.
Right.
Could you imagine what it would be if the risk pools were equal? Because Medicaid's already on unequal footing at a disadvantage when it comes to the insurance, because it's going to have sicker, more unhealthier people on its rolls.
Just by its very nature.
Right. So, but then there's also better benefits, really, when you look at Medicaid versus the the private sector in the exchanges, because with Medicaid you can apply anytime. The exchanges have set enrollment periods. In some instances, Medicaid actually has retroactive coverage. So like if say you're a woman and you're like 5 months pregnant, you sign up for Medicaid. Medicaid will actually retroactively cover your prenatal months 1 through 4. Yeah. No private insurance will do
deal.
That. Because that's what happens is people usually and this is the problem. This is why they need some sort of way to get people in that normally wouldn't buy insurance, because people who are healthy don't think about insurance until they need it. And that's kind of what this Medicaid retroactive thing does, because, they're not going to sign up for it until something happens and they actually need, health coverage. Medicaid has little to no cost sharing. Like if in most states you don't have it, but some states will give you like a token copay or something like that, but it's matter like a couple dollars. Where, I know copays in private insurance can get pretty steep, and then deductibles are very high, which is one of the problems what they say that they're trying to fix with this thing. And you might say, that's great, Dennis, but come on. I mean, it's Medicaid. It's the government.
Right.
It's got to be terrible.
It's got to be.
Or at least, a big complaint is access. Like, no one's going to take, their access to doctors must be horrid.
Right.
Well, that's not really the case either.
No, it is not.
Because in 2016, in a survey from the Commonwealth Fund. Now, to be fair, the Commonwealth Fund is they cheerlead the ACA.
Yes,
but this is a survey they did on the exchanges and Medicaid within the ACA. So they're not picking winners here. They want both
things to win.
They're not going to sit there and they're not going to stack the numbers one against the other.
They aren't single payer advocates.
No.
They are rooting for the highest level of coverage possible.
Right. That's what they want. They want people to be, and I say that rooting at the ACA, that's not really fair. If somebody came up, if the Republicans came back from recess and had a better plan to insure more people, I'm sure the Commonwealth Fund would
be. They came back with the BDB, right? Just advancing everything by a letter. See how I did that?
Right.
Then that's
like pun calculus.
Yeah, do you like that? But if they came back with something like that, these guys would still be supportive.
Right. So they did a survey in 2016, and they found that 78% of people on private exchanges were either satisfied or very satisfied with their insurance. That's not a bad number when it comes to healthcare.
No.
Okay. But if you compare that to Medicaid, 88% were satisfied or very satisfied. 88%. So if 88% of people are satisfied or very satisfied, they're obviously having access to care and getting decent care.
And just to make a quick commentary on human nature, there is nothing, I mean nothing, you can get a large population, because you're talking thousands of people that would have participated in that survey.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing you can get thousands of people to 100% agree is good. It is not a thing.
No. And furthermore, 51% of people enrolled on Medicaid said they were very satisfied versus only 38% of people saying they were very satisfied on the private exchanges.
Yeah.
And you don't have to if you don't like that study, you can go ahead and I think Gallup did a similar kind of study, but they did it at the public at large. It didn't really matter they didn't really look at the ACA. They were just looking at various types of insurance. They looked at the VA, they looked at Medicare, Medicaid, union-based insurance, if you're in a union, current or former employee, and then plans fully paid by you, and then people with no insurance. And they were just basically asked them, are you satisfied with the way the health system is working?
Right.
Which is a decent proxy for that question. Are you satisfied with your care? And number one was the military and the veterans, VA. They were 78% were happy. Medicare at 77. Medicaid at 75. Then union-based insurance at 71. Current or former employee, 69%. So there's about 10 points behind roughly.
Yeah.
Medicaid. And then fully paid by yourself is 65%. And then if you were uninsured, 41% of those people were actually happy with the way the healthcare system is working.
Well,
and the uninsured is probably young people who are
if
healthy.
you're really, really healthy,
right? You're like, hey, I'm good.
I'm fine. I'm not paying anything and whatever.
So that really tells me that Medicaid's doing okay.
Yeah. And what's important about this discussion here is that if you listen to the, for lack of a better term, propaganda that's out there right now, you would think Medicare was
Medicaid.
Medicaid was a trash can fire, right? And it's
that's
not.
What I'm saying. That's what I'm saying here. And I'm not doing this to
it's not perfect.
It's not. No, it's healthcare. It's not going to be perfect.
Nope.
No one likes to go to the doctor, and it's not fun. It's not like that's the problem. It's like it's a no-win situation. This is one of the things where if you were championing change and improvement, it's so easy to beat up on you.
Yeah. Well, so sans like routine checkup, right? Everything in healthcare assumes something has already gone wrong.
Right.
Right? Like if I'm going to a doctor and it's not just for a routine checkup, it means I've got an ache or I've got this thing on my leg that I don't know where, is that the right shape? Should that, should I get that removed?
Right. Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
You're already on like mental high alert.
My tooth hurts really bad. Right. Like, so something is wrong. Right. So it's the backup quarterback scenario, right? Like by the time the backup quarterback goes in, the offense is already, failed. Right. Like something has gone horribly.
Yeah. Your
wrong.
Offensive coordinator is going to have a tough time at getting that going.
Everyone thinking everything's firing on all cylinders.
But and I want to show that the bad X-Files reference, but the truth is out there.
Yeah.
Like the internet will tell you what's really going on if you look at the right sources and you go to like sources that are like, gold standard type sources here. Like you said, like pretty much any government statistical agency, that's going to be straight up good data to use.
The reason why I think that's the case, right? Because I completely agree. But the reason why I think that's the case is there is no profit motive swaying one way or the other.
Right. It's just a bunch of it's a bunch of worker bees just here.
They're cranking out their study.
Do this. I need the answer to this. I want to know what these numbers look like. And it's really just like because the government, when you work within government, it is very there are a lot of rules and regulations.
Yes, there are.
When it comes to swaying what someone is going to do. You can't sit there and tell somebody like how an outcome should look.
No. And think so not to get too into the history weeds here, but thank the Civil Service Act for that. Right? Like the fact that we have a separate, civil servant population. So the big knock on government and government initiatives is really cost effectiveness and potentially efficiency, depending on what you're talking about. But it should almost never be, they're being swayed by, the political winds of the day.
Right.
That's just, it's not that common. Now, it does happen, right? Like, example, hate to get really into this, but 2003, right? Like, vice president is in, the DNI and the DIA yelling at people to come up with analysis
for a certain war we got involved in.
Hypothetical war with a four-letter country, right? Like, that makes an impact. But that is an oddity, and that's why it's pointed to. Right? And that those scenarios do not happen with an organization like the CBO because their studies don't carry that kind of sway. Right. They are a government think tank.
Right. And I'm going healthcare because it's kind of on everyone's mind right now, and it's kind of like the topic du jour. So, and I kind of wanted to go with like this is my example of how truth is being perverted right now in our society.
And you could debunk a lot of stuff by just doing this. The other thing that I lament about the time we're in is there used to be, back in my day, there were these things called papers of record.
Yep.
Right? And the New York Times and to a slightly lesser extent, the Washington Post were considered the papers of record.
Yeah, I would say that. Well, I mean, I would hope that a majority still sees the New York Times as a paper of record.
I would hope. I mean, given what they have done as an organization over time for revealing graft and corruption and so on, I think they've done a pretty good job at that. So, but like to see let's say the New York Post or Breitbart or Infowars. Did you see the thing about the guy on Infowars had
Alex Jones?
Yeah. Find you in a bed with a goblin. So Alex Jones had someone on his show claiming that that NASA had been setting up child slave colonies on Mars.
Oh, wait. Yep. I did see that.
And NASA...
That was like a couple weeks ago.
Poor NASA. Some PR official in NASA had to come out with an official statement denying that they had child slave colonies on Mars.
No, we just have the original slave colony. No, exactly. We have not spawned off any child slave
ones.
Colonies.
No, that child slave colonies.
Oh, you mean children,
Mars.
not subsidiary slave colonies.
Not subsidiary.
Oh, okay.
But so what I'm saying is that this oddity that we have in history right now, where we say everybody should have their voice at the
that is nuttery.
Puts Infowars and the New York Times.
I know.
On even footing in some people's
I don't
minds.
know who it was, but someone gave the Infowars like actual White House press credentials.
I'm pretty sure I know who did it.
I'm not sure who did it.
I'm pretty confident I know who did it. So yeah, that's my point. Is like you got Infowars, which is clearly a conspiracy website.
Yes,
right? Like that's
easily.
What it is.
Well, I mean, my personal feeling is
it's performance art.
Exactly
what he does.
Like Rush Limbaugh, I think buys what he's selling. Like he's like I
don't think Alex Jones does it all.
I think Alex Jones is just an actor.
Yeah.
So
I think he's actually very good at his job of being a crazy or acting like a crazy person. Right. But so anyways, that's what I lament now is that this idea that like non-reputable sources are held up against pretty darn reputable sources as if they are, even Steven in the analysis.
And that's the big problem. It's like you have, a guy, you have like Glenn Thrush from the Times sitting like, a few seats over from somebody from Infowars.
Yeah, Joe Blow from Infowars.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's just not.
So, but I wanted to get on to like, because there's a lot of bullshit around this healthcare bill. And okay, the biggest one is kind of like the axiom of the bill itself, because they're like saying that the bill is to improve healthcare. That is really, the bill is called the Better Care Reconciliation Act. That's like the Senate's name that's the Senate bill.
Right.
And they're saying that, that would give one the impression that they're actually trying to improve our healthcare system.
Right.
But as I've just said, they're pulling like over $1 billion out of it over 10 years.
Right.
No, I'm sorry. $1 trillion. Trillion with a T.
Yeah, that's another comma.
Right.
It's kind of a big
deal. I missed
deal.
3 zeros there. I forgot to carry 3 zeros. Yeah, so they're pulling $1 trillion out over 10 years.
And, I can say this pretty definitively that like at least best estimates out there say that this bill will absolutely not provide better health care for 22 million people.
Right. It won't. And you know what they're doing with that money?
Oh, yeah, I do. But go right ahead.
Well, $700 billion is going into a tax cut for those making over $200,000 a year.
Yep.
Drug companies and insurance companies. And 33 billion of that 700 is just going to go, and this is the part that really gets me here. $33 billion is going to go to 400 taxpayers.
Yeah.
That's 5%.
The 400 richest families in this country will get $33 billion.
400 taxpayers.
Yes.
And so that $33 billion could provide 10 years of Medicaid for over 640,000 people. That's enough to fund Medicaid expansion in Nevada, Alaska, Arkansas, and West Virginia.
Yeah, and if you think about that, and you think about how disingenuous it is, and I think I've said that word a lot in this.
Well, we're doing an episode on like facts and truths. And,
But if you think about how egregious the lie is that Mitch McConnell is selling here, that he's doing anything in the interest of the broader American public, and you just look at the numbers,
it's a tax
obvious
cut. It's a tax cut.
He's lying.
This is a tax cut. That's really what this is.
Yeah.
That's the lie, the big lie. And here's the thing: is I think they're backpedaling off of this because it's come out this week that they're looking at adjusting those tax cuts. I think because they've been found out, like they're realizing that this isn't going well. They wanted to ram this through, like, they couldn't really. They wanted to sneak the shit burger through before they left for the July 4th recess, and they couldn't get it done because some members had a conscience, it seemed, and kind of stood up and said, no, we don't like the idea of taking, $700 billion out of people who need medical care and just giving it to drug companies and very, very wealthy folks, which good on them. I mean, that they stood up and said something. But the talk that I've heard, and by the time this airs, probably, I'm assuming they'll announce that they're going to be
whatever they're going to
retweaking it and not giving out such, a good boon to the wealthy at the expense of the less fortunate in the country.
The one thing I think you're right that if the little bit of history we have to draw from this, right, is basically the House bill that went through. And the first version of the House bill that went through, I believe, this was the thing I was saying earlier. Because one of the things that's talked about a lot with both of these bills is, the cuts, right? Like the actual dollars and cents and so on. But there were also tons of provisions that were just protections, right? Like,
that's
that they were guarantees of certain services. Like the one that is talked about the most is pre-existing conditions, right? The coverage for those types of things. And the way that you can tell that stuff's good is, guess what Congress exempted themselves from? All of those repeals of those provisions. So they left in all of the stuff saying, no. Our preconditions, they're cool.
Right.
But if you ever had cancer or were pregnant,
yeah, that counts.
Right? Or were sexually assaulted, which that
counts too, yes.
Yeah. Those things, they don't get covered for, I don't know, tens of millions of Americans, but they get covered for us few congressmen. So there's that, right? Like that's how you can, and then when that became public, they backed off. They pulled those provisions out. So that's why I say, like, these men are cowards, but they think we're all dumb.
Yes. That's essentially the two-pronged approach here.
Yeah, it's exactly, right? Like, they're cowards, so if people get wise and they get angry, they'll back off.
Yeah.
But they're betting nobody's going to get wise.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're realizing they're facing this opposition now, and I think they're kind of they've made this their goal, so they're going to try to get something done.
Yeah.
Now, and let's lay it all out here. There are issues with the ACA.
Oh yeah.
Like, there are lots.
Oh yeah, there's lots of problems.
There's a lot of problems with the ACA. But like, let's open them up to debate and fix them.
Right. Let's not do them behind closed doors with 13 senators. Many of the senators that are on the health, what do they call it in the Senate committee? The health committee. I can't
remember the full name.
But the committee that manages health and human services and so on. we're not allowed to participate until right towards the end of the drafting of the bill, right? Like, I just would like public debate around this.
Right.
I mean,
and because that actually leads to another lie that like the ACA was
done in secret.
or rammed through. Let's go over some of the facts here on ACA because
these are actual facts.
Yeah.
And this stuff blew my mind when I was going back over it.
It's like, because they're doing it under, like, instead of telling the truth or just saying like why they're doing it behind closed doors, they would go, the ACA Obamacare was behind closed doors and was rammed through, right, with
was rammed through at the last minute,
right? And it's bullshit. It's not. It's like a bald-faced lie.
Yeah.
It was debated for almost a year. Because in April 2009, this is the best part about it. Max Baucus, who's a Democrat, and Chuck Grassley, who's a Republican, held the first of 3 roundtables with health policy and industry experts to start crafting the bill.
Right.
So they worked together on a committee. It went through multiple committees and votes.
Oh, can I interrupt you for one
second?
Well,
Sure.
Okay. And I just want to point out that the starting point for the bill was the Republican crafted Massachusetts bill.
Yeah.
That Mitt Romney, as governor, had helped to put in place.
Backed by the Heritage Foundation.
All right. Continue.
Okay. It went through multiple committees and votes. And this really got me. With over 160 Republican amendments accepted into the bill.
Yeah. And if you think about that shit, and then what the common like demagoguery that's going on right now, your nose will start bleeding and you'll wake up on the floor.
Okay. It wasn't signed until March 23rd of 2010, a year after it started. So that flies right in the face of another lie that they keep repeating over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why I'm bringing up all this bullshit
is it's actually making me angry.
Is because that's the same shit that AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon are trying to do with net neutrality. They're taking a cue from what's going on in Washington, and they're saying, hey, this looks like it might be working.
The classic term is disinformation, right? If they can, mess up the signal to noise ratio a little bit more, then we stay dumb. And if we stay dumb, they can cram through what they want. Right?
Yeah. I mean,
that's what it comes down to.
That's where we are right now. And that is kind of just, it's like the way things are going. You turn on the news and it's really nothing but utter like bullshit and lies that you have to sift through.
It is.
And let me check this quote out.
All right.
The most brilliant propagandist technique will yield no success unless one fundamental principle is borne in mind constantly and with unflagging attention. It must confine itself to a few points and repeat them over and over. Here, as so often with this world, persistence is the first and most important requirement for success.
I don't want to ask where that's from, but where's it from?
Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler.
Why did it have to be? Okay, so that sounds eerily familiar to what's actually happening.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Build a wall.
Build wall.
Make America great again.
Oh, mega. I'm just resting my head on the mic. And I'm sorry. We tried, people, for a long time not to get political about this.
I can't help it anymore.
But the FCC stuff has gotten political.
It has. It started there. I mean, I wasn't going to do that on the show, but I'm really starting to get to a point now where I'm starting to fear for my own country because it's just it's downright scary right now what's going on. Like,
our leaders are straight up lying to us.
Yes.
Right?
Like, not spin. Spin, okay, fine. Because spin, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You know, on spin. Sure, I know you have an agenda. Okay, I can see how you might see it that way, or you can kind of twist it that way. And people rationalize things all the time, and that's
different. Yeah.
This is just, there is no way you can believe that you can have open internet without Title II.
No.
It's been proven time and time again that you can't because of the way the rules and regulations are written.
Right. Well, and even
you can tell that
that's exactly right.
Pulling $1 trillion out of healthcare bill, that people are going to lose healthcare coverage.
Yeah, people will
people will die.
This motherfucker. What was that guy's name who was like, no one's ever died from lack of health care?
Okay, I heard that guy. I can't remember his name, but that's exactly what we're talking about here.
And people, this was a town hall, and I wish I remember which representative said it. I'm going to look it up when you start talking in a second, but I want to finish this thought. But he said, that quote, that no one had ever died from lack of health care, and people in his town hall exploded because, one, it's a lie.
Yeah.
Two,
it's an obvious
lie. Fucking dumb lie.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so if you're gonna lie to me, at least have some stagecraft, right? Like, don't just be like, the New York Times is fake news. The earth is flat. No one dies from like healthcare coverage being removed from that. But it's just fucking lazy.
It is. And and let me be clear here. You might be on the other side of the spectrum. You might not agree with, 80, 90% of the stuff that Joel and I have said today. But that's not the point. The point is, use the net, research what's happening, look at sources, find out the truth. Don't just accept it. Don't sit in front of CNN or Fox and just kind of accept what they're saying, because they want a narrative. The reason why they're doing it's no fun. Like, it doesn't help their ratings if they're actually, refereeing it and saying this is a fact, this is legit, because then the conversation is over.
Right.
They need the conflict. They need there to be 2 points that are fighting back and forth, and they need to kind of give equal weight to each point. Otherwise, the ratings go down, because people are just going to tune out, because they need to see a story. They need to see conflict. They need a narrative. And if you're looking for entertainment, and I feel if you're looking for entertainment, go ahead and watch cable news. But if you're looking for truth and facts, read the papers, check the sources, look at real data.
Yeah. Oh, and I just want to say I found it. It was Representative Labrador from Idaho. So if anyone's in his district, please vote that dumb asshole out of office. Who said, I just want to repeat it again. He said I can play the tape of him saying, no one dies from lack of healthcare access.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
So, I know this typically isn't a political podcast, and today we got a bit political.
Yeah, and I, to reiterate Dennis's point,
we probably lost some listeners today.
We
lost some listeners today.
I'm sorry, but I don't care if people agree with my political leanings. I just want us to have like a debate on the world being round, right? Like let's talk about a world that's round and not a world that's flat or maybe round, right? Like one of those has been disqualified at this point.
I just want, McConnell is threatening his colleagues with working with the Democrats. He's basically saying, if we're not getting this bill done, we might have to work with the other side. And he's not saying that as like an olive branch of bipartisan. That's a threat. It's like a gun saying that is crazy. I just want our system to work the way it was intended in the Constitution, where you have a majority party and a minority party that, they might not agree, but they will sit down and they'll work out a compromise, and maybe the minority party will get like a fourth of what it wants to get the bill through, maybe pick up some extra votes. Right. That's the way our system is supposed to work. Well, and that's how it's worked up until about maybe 10 years ago.
And that's what's driving me nuts. And what spawned all of this, and what caused Dennis and I to start talking about some of these issues that I'm sure had some people drop our subscription, but it was that, we're seeing the same thing come out of the FCC, right? Like, it's the same thing. The arguments they're making
it's the same tactics.
They're the same tactics. They belie reason, and they're just straight lying to us, right? Like, they're lying. There is no evidence that you can leave the ISP market alone, and the monopolists that run it won't throttle, right? Like,
they've proven they will
do it.
They've done it.
They've sued to be able to do it,
and they've done it when they had
the
opportunity.
Won the lawsuit,
right?
Which is where we had to, or where the FCC had to step in and enforce Title II. So, anyways, just to bring us back home on that.
And on that, I think we've closed out a show.
I feel good.
If you enjoy the podcast,
if you're still there,
please subscribe. And you know what? Tell your friends, because we're going to need to make up for the 25% of the audience that probably
the other
just
half
tuned
of
out.
the internet we just made angry.
Right. So, we appreciate the subscriptions, review. I'm sure, we're probably going to get a few 1 stars off of this podcast.
But honestly, if you stuck with us and you're someone either who agrees with us, or maybe even especially those who don't agree with all the opinions we espouse.
Yeah, tell us in the comments.
We'd love to hear about it.
Like,
right?
you know what?
We want to talk to people about this stuff.
Tweet at me at Grounded Reason, or send us an email at podcast@groundedreason.com. Go to the Facebook page and say something, or you can go to groundedreason.com and say, I'm not a jerk when it comes to opposing views. And if you didn't like anything we said, or you had another argument, feel free, and I'll talk about it.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll say in our defense in this is that we spent most of our time talking bad about Congress, and I think herpes has a higher, favorable rating than Congress. Right now.
Or, and I'm sure, or that nuclear gonorrhea that's going around. Did you see that? There's uncurable gonorrhea now.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Or Congress.
Right.
That's it. That's its street name is Congress.
So, on STDs, let's close this one.
God, we're going out on that?
I guess so. Right. All right, everybody. Have a good week.
All right. Take care, everyone.